Okay, good. Okay. So so what it is that, we are going through this pandemic, and it's not quite over, but yet we have had some issues dealt with, and the silver bullet, as it were, that is come our way is the vaccine. Um, and with that, I think we can look forward to at least next year having to some sort of normality. But this year has been quite sort of disruptive to the economy, to people's lives, and to their health, and to all the social interactions that one has. So in a way, the cost has been quite enormous. But what I'm going to be talking about is a little bit concerning the financial part of it, because what we have done, or the governments have done, is to um, have support for the people and the companies, because lockdown meant that we had to stay indoors. Uh, and of course, big industries like the hospitality and all that were dramatically affected. The airlines as well. So the impact has been enormous. But the fact that we have this rather big packages come our way from the government coffers, as it were, has seen, I think, the public through. Okay, what we're going to be talking today, of course, is going to cover that, which is, do you want to turn your thing off, Jim? Yeah, thanks. Um, so we're going to be covering essentially the huge borrowings that have taken place for the support of the economy. It is unprecedented in historical terms, and it has been quite sizable. And we'll go into that a little bit more later on. And of course, where has the money come from? Well, the money has come from by borrowing, and borrowing means that they essentially print more money. And we'll go into that a little bit more. Then we can look at a little bit about the India case, because India is doing a slightly different thing in a way, and that is not just printing money. We'll see how far they're going to get with that type of strategy. Pakistan has been also taken an initiative looking long term at how to deal with this global, if you like, debt that has accrued. So we want to be able to look at that as well to see what is that initiative. And then we'll see a little bit of what action has taken place on the stock market. So what we have in the stock market is really a boom right now, but let's explain as to why that boom has come about. So we'll talk about that. And then, of course, underlying all this has been the Brexit, and that's coming to a head as well. So just a little mention of that as to what sort of impact it may have. And then the vaccine, because vaccines have come into the picture, and we'll see what the implications of that is. Okay, let's look at and see what was the situation in terms of, if you like, the state of the country before Corona came in. And you can see some of these things over here. Perhaps you're able to see it. Are you? I suppose it is possible. We have okay, I'm going to sort of make it a bit bigger and see how that works. Yeah, okay, here we are. So before the pandemic came in, we had this issue about having to deal with the economy, which was becoming a little bit more data oriented. Now, on the left side, that's the top one that you can see here, right? And we also had to do, before the pandemic, disruption for the future of work, because technology had come in such a big way that it was impacting. In fact, technology has been impacting the work scene quite a lot the last few decades, but it's becoming a bit more accelerated in its impact before the corona. And of course, we had issues before the corona, which had to do with environmental issues, the sustainability, all that, the energy issue. And then, of course, we had, let me move that a bit down there. Yeah. Um, that the emergence of the East, as it were, China, the rise of China and India, as it were. So that was also impacting the global scene before the corona. And of course, in some of these emerging economies, like even India and China, there was a huge urbanization programs that meant a lot of people were coming from the rural areas into this urban areas. So we already had these type of problems. And after the corona, what has been happening is this year, we are seeing a rise of geopolitics because countries have been under pressure of one sort or another, and therefore the geopolitics also came in. When I talk about geopolitics, we're talking about relationships between the countries and how they relate to each other regarding their own interests. Um, so now here also government driven. So we've got uh, post pandemic, the government driven to technical, spend. Um, One real application is, of course, the trace and track thing as well, which hasn't really sort of done much inroads, but there it was. And then, of course, things like meetings, Zooms, all that sort of things started to change quite a bit from government sort of work as well. Um, then, of course, health also took a new urgency because we had this pandemic and we weren't quite prepared for it. And we had to scramble, in fact, and we haven't quite got to grips with it as yet. And of course, new technologies are coming in because of the new environment and the stay home economy. Of course, that is also sort of making a big impact on how things will shape up in the future. Right, so here we are now. I'm going to sort of change that a bit. So as far as the US was concerned, I don't know whether you could see all this. Perhaps not. Maybe I'll revert back to this. Okay, well, I'm going to sort of just go back a little bit, just to catch up where we are, and um, go back to the screen sharing, so which is a bit more holistic. Okay. Um, okay. Now, if you look at the actions taken by governments, we saw in the US that they had uh, took time to try and recognize how serious this coronavirus is. So they shut down very late. And today, to date, I think they've got something like 300,000 deaths. And they expect to sort of reach under 500,000, I think, by the whole, maybe by next year, if they don't really take action. But with Trump going now, maybe that action might be forthcoming. And and Biden might be listening to the experts a bit more than Trump did. So that late shutdown caused a lot of deaths. And the reason given was that the economy, if it suffered a lot, then there would be more of an impact on the society than it has taken by the death toll. That argument, I think, is not right because one of the big economists, Larry Summers, you remember, he was interviewed the other day and he said, unless the people's health is good, the economy can't be healthy. Now, that makes a lot of sense to me. So, primary priority should be given to the health issues and then subsequently to the economy. So, the US has really suffered because of ineptness of the Trump government. Oh, another thing that we see that has happened is as soon as the pandemic came in the middle of the year, we had a huge stock market as well crashing. I remember now it had already gone up to 27, 28, the Dow Jones, and then came down to below 2000. So it was quite a big 30% loss or 25 to 30% loss. But at the moment the government started to announce the stimulus packages and the furloughs and the support for the SMEs, the stock market was go up because they said, fine, we are going to sort of at least have some money coming in. Now, here is the picture of how it has. You see, in March, as we were sort of trundling along here, and the pandemic came along with the shutdowns, the lockdowns rather, and then its whole thing crashed, as you can see, humongous little 30% Dow Jones. It says over there. So interesting picture there. That's the crash. This by sort of times, and this is how it started to move up. Now, after the crash of March this year, it started to move up, and that's interesting. It started to move up because the stimulus started to kick in, and of course, the money that came from the government essentially was there for people to use. So they did buy and so on. The businesses had some business coming their way. But a fair amount of money actually went into the stock market, which is why the stock market sort of started to go. Uh, a lot of people saw also because the interest rates were so low, the best thing to do was to put money into the stock market, which was rising. One, because of this artificial stimulus that the government was bringing in, and secondly, because this surplus funds that they had was then sitting there in the bank, not earning anything, so they started to buy stock. And that's one of the reasons why it started to sort of move up, and it's at a very high point right now. So those who have bought Tesla have done well as well. Now, what is the state of the economy? If you look at this picture here, this is the GDP of the USA and so on. You can see the GDP of the USA is something like 21 trillion. And then you've got China, which is about this number here. And then UK is about something here, 2 trillion. So it's just to give you a measure of relative sizes of the economies of the world. Uh, Now, what they have done is, of course, each government, you can see, has started to do the stimulus. And stimulus meant actually printing money in simple terms, making the money available by borrowing. And they basically borrow not simply by printing notes, but by having this electronic accounting type of way that they know that they've got enough money, and the banks then are able to lend more. So all their reserves are also, are handled in such a way so the banks can lend more money. So you can see this is what the stimulus and support has meant to keep the economy going. Now, where does that money go then? Once the money comes in, it goes into these sort of areas, households and businesses. So in the case of USA, I think at the time when this was made, it was 2 trillion. Now that has gone up even further to 3.5 trillion, I think. So economies are still working because of the stimulus. Okay, who has been actually doing the money side of it? These are the Federal Reserve there in USA, and then Bank of England here in UK, and the European Central Bank in Europe. So these big banks from the rich and large economies have participated in making that stimulus come about so as to keep the economies afloat. And they are very much into that business of lending. So they haven't stopped lending. Uh, they do charge a bit of money if you go and try to borrow from the bank, but quite often, the rates are so low, so it encourages people to borrow and also to spend money on their businesses. Now, this is showing the 750 billion euro um, sort of stimulus that the EU has just agreed to, I think, in the last few days. There was a bit of a block by Hungary and Poland because they are on the outliers as far as human rights are concerned. And EU was a little bit annoyed about that. But finally, they came around and they said, okay, we don't want to lose out the money that's going to come our way. Um, so they passed. Otherwise, they were vetoing that stimulus bill. Now, once the money comes in, it's like a helicopter dropping money on the in the marketplace and in the households. So it's just another picture, sort of amusing picture, as it were. Central bank having loads of money, dropping cash down there. Okay, so what are the ways that government can raise money when it needs it? One thing that the government can do is to go into austerity measures, cutting down expenditures and so on. It can borrow from in the domestic markets or the external markets of global markets, or the governments will print money. So these are the ways that the government can, in fact, um, bring about the means for the stimulus and so on. And we'll see who's doing what with that type of option. Now, in the case of banks printing that money, what we have is a lot of money comes into the market and in the hands of the people. And when you have lots of money coming into the hands of the people, of course, it causes prices to increase because the demand is a bit more and goods may not be that many. So that sort of increases the prices and that causes inflation. So that borrowing, if you like, or printing of money has that potential impact. So you have to be careful as to how to deal with that. And governments are always afraid that they don't want to bring in inflation too much because that sort of causes humongous amount of disruption in the economy. Now, when you borrow, you increase the national debt. And that debt is the one that governments have to recover. And it recovers from the people ultimately by increasing taxes or cutting government expenditure. So you can see how governments try to sort of deal with this money that they are injecting into the economy. Now, what the Indian government has done, India has been severely affected as well. And because of its big, if you like, population, and it's a poor country, its infrastructure is weak, and its economy is also not that sort of strong. So what they have said is they're not going to print money, because printing money means eventually you have to use that money for something. So long as you give the money to the public, that's fine. But if you want to pay offshore loans, then people may not accept your currency because it's a weak currency, and therefore they say, no, pay us in dollars. And dollars are difficult to get if you're not exporting enough goods and so on. So you can see the difficulties governments get into. So what they started to do was to say, well, we'll go for austerity and cut down expenditure. And that may not sort of take them too far. Now, with this big stimulus that has been organized by the countries, and of course the expenditures of poorer countries to try and deal with this pandemic, that has increased their debt levels. Now, you might remember after the war, there was a meeting called Bretton Woods. There they managed to define the New World Order in terms of the financial world as well. They came up with this IMF, the World Bank, and they had the Marshall Plan and all that sort of thing. And the UN was created. Uh, so you have, when the countries come together, they come up with certain types of ways of dealing with the big issues that they are faced with. Because after the war, there was a big issue of having to regenerate the economies and rebuild all the countries. A lot of money was needed. So these entities, the banks, in the international stage, came in and did what they could to try and bring everything back. So it's a similar type of action that needs to be taken. Or even for that matter, in 2008, when we had the financial crisis of the subprime, you remember that money had been loaned out quite a lot to people who may not necessarily have been able to afford the repayments. But nevertheless, I think when Clinton came in, he wanted to make sure that the poorer people managed to get the money as well. And therefore, he made it possible for them to borrow money for housing and so on. And they, of course, borrowed. And then, but while the economy was fine, it was okay. But sooner or later, when the economy started to do not too well, then that was difficult for them to make the repayments back. And also at the same time, what had happened is these banks were playing fast and loose. They put together bundles of packages, which included this loans that people had taken to buy houses and so on, and they mixed it up with some good loans with bad loans, and they marketed that to everybody and saying this is all good stuff. That's what the subprime was about. And of course, that sort of collapsed because the values of the houses went down, and those securities that were sold also were not put very valuable. So what happened was the banks had to be bailed out, and you remember in 2008, all the central banks led by Gordon Brown and by Obama, they came up with a solution to um, put aside the huge loan that were losses as well that were resulted from the subprime collapse of the market. They then injected a lot of money and bailed these big banks out, and that's how the whole thing was overcome. And they put a few conditions of the banks also not to play fast and loose like that, and that they maintained higher levels of reserve, uh, so that if there was a run on the bank, they would be able to manage that. So you can see that debt can cause a lot of problems as well. Here is this debt here, and it says over here, money will circulate. So once the money starts to circulate in the economy, the money that's coming in from the stimulus uh, and having a larger money supply coming in than it was before, that leads to this inflation, as I said earlier on. There's this thing here. This inflation keeps on going up like that. And of course, when it goes up, the value of your currency goes down and things become more expensive. Um, there it is. There's a similar picture. Governments are trying to increase the taxes of people to try and reduce the loans, and also cutting expenditure where they can. In the case of India, there was no sense in printing money, so they didn't print money because it meant that it wasn't the solution for India. Nevertheless, they were trying to sort of see how they could deal with the stimulus, and they also had to put some stimulus in. And they did that by seeing whether they could sort of look at some of the savings that the banks had, or people's savings. And those savings were also not many. So these are the savings of people in banks. And this savings also had been reduced because of the pandemic. So what they could get from that sort of savings account of banks was less. So what India did was to try and go to the privatize some of their national assets, in a way, sold them, and by selling them, they made a bit of money, and that gave them also some income because once you sell the things there, the private companies buy the government sort of assets, and then they can give some taxes to the government. Okay, so this is really a picture of UK, how UK has been affected. Now, this shows you various countries, how much they have been impacted. And UK is one of the economies that has been hardest hit. As you can see, United Kingdom is up here, Italy next, France here. Then, of course, the other countries are a bit less. China is the least because they came out of that pandemic quite quickly. But UK hasn't as yet. Now, the impact of the first wave has been this blue bar, which means we had a loss of about 10% of the economy there, GDP, fall in GDP. And then this further red block here is another 2-3%. So we may be between up to about 15% drop in our GDP. Remember, the GDP was about 2 to 3 trillion. So 15% of that is quite a big amount. So it says basically the UK is likely to be the hardest hit by the COVID-19 amongst major economies. That's the OECD. Is likely to slump to 11.5% slump by, okay. 2020 slightly outstripping all the countries. So it's going to be worse than all these other countries. And if the second peak is well coming in, that the slump will be up to 14%. And that will cast a long shadow over the world, basically because Britain is regarded one of the good economies used to. Now, this is a breakdown of all the various sectors that have been impacted by the COVID, with losses up to 60% in this top sector here. If you see, that's the airlines, I think accommodation and food, and the travel thing there. So both of them, hospitality business is going to be has been affected quite a lot dramatically, and this is the other sectors how they have been affected. So quite a big loss uh, in terms of job losses, in terms of revenues, and so on. Basically, this is saying around 7.6 million jobs are at risk. That's about 24% of the UK workforce. So that's quite a big hit that the economy is going to be taking. So here we are looking at and seeing this light blue thing tells you the jobs at risk, and that this is various sort of sectors. Total is about 7.5 million. You can look at your own convenience, all the impact that it's having on the various sectors. Now, one of the things is Britain has been unfortunate that during the pandemic, the Brexit also has been at play. Now, without the pandemic, Brexit was also going to be giving a bad sort of hit to the economy, especially when there's no deal. And we are finding right today that there might be a deal, but that deal strikes to me as a 1% type of deal out of 100. Just saying, okay, we've agreed, but not on really good lot of things. So it seems to me it's a thin agreement that we're going to have. And all because people have said, for some reason, we want a sovereignty, and that's very important. But then, as somebody said on the TV this morning, sovereignty in the 19th century concept, where nobody can be completely free. We're all interdependent and so on. So that notion of sovereignty is a good soundbite, and therefore not necessarily a good thing for the country. Now, this is showing that in the long term, um, Brexit is going to have more of an impact than the COVID. So this is, the type of graph that's showing you to what extent it's being hit. Right at the bottom is this no deal Brexit over here. That's going to impact, the drop in our GDP to that extent over a longer period compared to the COVID, which is that red one. Okay, now this is the story about the developing countries because the okay, this is UK economy at the moment, and we have been hit severely as one of the worst cases in Europe is because of our significant service and tourist sectors. City has service sectors, financial services and so on, and tourism was also big. And of course, they have been hit, and that's why UK is coming out bad, added to the Brexit uncertainties. Now, one of the things that has happened, of course, is that we have the low income countries were at high risk or of already in debt because we said that pro coronavirus already the world was having so many issues. And of course, even more issues as far as the low income countries are concerned. And therefore, their issue became worse with this pandemic. Their output has contracted enormously. And now we need to be able to see how it is that they can recover. So there is a call for debt relief, and one of the people who's calling for debt relief is Imran Khan. He's one of those people who's come recently on the world stage, but has fresh ideas, good ideas. He's honest, and he's seen it all before in terms of fame and so on, and celebrity status. So he's not hankering for that. Like a lot of politicians, they want to make a name for themselves, and they do a lot of crooked things, especially in the developing world, and of course in the developed world as well. So he's calling for debt relief for all the countries in some way because they have been affected enormously. Okay, he said the G20 countries were coming up with a debt relief initiative, but more details were required. The G20 took place only last week or maybe last month, I think. They came to a lot of decisions. One of them was to try and see whether they can do something about the debt relief for the poorer countries. Because, the poorer countries need to, otherwise, because of the healthcare and the environment issues, the things were diverted, what they earn, if you like. And these are the other countries that backed him to say, yes, we need some help. These are the top countries that have debt. You can see that in your own time. Let's just give you a relative picture. This is a picture of Pakistan debt, because I talk about Pakistan because we've looked at Pakistan from the point of view of its close association with China and with that CPEC program, Belt and Road Initiative, which is a lifeline for Pakistan. And of course, they are, sorry, call, and they are now on the under a good government, honest government, and they have the potential to be able to do well for themselves. Now, one of the ways of dealing with the debt of these developing countries is this, what they call a debt for climate and nature program swaps. Now, what does that mean? It basically means that you'll get some debt relief from the international organizations and from other sources if they are able to do something about the climate. And already Pakistan has planted 1 billion trees, and therefore stands well out as having done something substantive. But the program is that they will plant another 9 billion all over the country. And he's got a lot of school children involved in, aggressively pursuing that path. Okay, now coming to the question of vaccines, we hear that vaccine has come, and then a lot of rich countries are buying up. So what happens to the poorer countries? As it says over here, if only the wealthiest countries in the world are protected, then international trade, commerce, and society as a whole will continue to be hit hard as the pandemic continues to rage across the globe. So, as I said earlier on, if you have only one part of the globe as healthy, the other one is not, then globally it's not going to work because we're all interconnected, and therefore it's one of those things that needs to be addressed evenly, as equitably as possible. Now, I thought I'd show you this little cold chain because these viruses need to be kept at very, very low temperatures. So you can see from this picture, once it goes from the aircraft, gets into these refrigerated things, into refrigerated warehouses, and then from cars to local sort of areas, and then it needs to be finally reach the people with even on a motorbike, maybe with a little um, freezer compartment at the back. So you can see this is called the cold chain, and these cold chains are not very strong in the poorer or developing countries. Even in here, I think the cold chains are not very well organized as yet. Now, what would be the cost of these vaccines? Um, Now, we know that it takes quite a lot of money to develop them, but what one of the figures that Moderna has given is that they will be selling it for $30 odd, $30 to $40. That's about 25 pounds or under 30 pounds a dose. I don't know how many you need to take per year, but I think usually you need to take one and then a booster. But still, living in the more sort of prosperous countries, this is affordable. Governments will probably pay for it. But in the poorer countries, I don't think if these prices are the same there, it's going to be a big, big sort of, no for them. And this is the other one, AstraZeneca. They said for a few dollars per dose. So they seem to be thinking along the light lines, but we'll have to see how much that works out. Uh, Now, some of these foundations, like Gavi and Bill Gates Foundation, they're making resources available for purchase of vaccines to be given to the poorer countries. So we'll see, and that cost will be about $2 to $3 each. So there is some little move in that to solve that. Okay, what I'm going to do now is to leave it here for a little bit of a Q&A maybe, and then we'll talk about it.
Oh, Shafiq, I've arrived now.
Okay, very good. See you then.
Right, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to sort of make that into a gallery thing. Right. Okay, so we'll embark on our Q&A. I see some regulars over here. June, welcome. Nemi, welcome. Maureen, welcome. And Alan, yeah. Okay, anybody having any particular question? Hi, Jim. Yeah, go ahead, Jim. You can unmute yourself when you want to ask a question.
Yeah, just in terms of social unrest because of the 7.6 million potential job cuts, have you seen any research on that, on how people will react? You know what I mean? Those
Yeah.
Because I'm a bit worried about it, especially it could be racial connotations. I mean, you've seen that some soccer matches, it's starting to creep through.
Yeah, there
upset.
is. Yeah, you're right. There is that danger, but at the moment, because the government is still sort of providing money to the people in some ways, and the jobs are protected, the real impact has not been felt yet.
But what I'm thinking is long term. That's what I'm saying. Is I know it finishes the end of March, doesn't it? The furlough after that. I just wondered if any research has been done on.
No, I haven't actually, and it seems to me that the first sort of problem is always the weakest neck that gets squeezed. And we want to be able to make sure that that doesn't happen. And the fact that we have this magic money tree for the moment, we'll see how far it goes because we've got a double whammy here. We've got Brexit plus this pandemic, mismanaged both of them, you know. enormously. And we are going to be then raising these social and factors are going to be causing a lot of disruption. I think, in my opinion, you're right. But that's the sort of thing I'm not hearing much on the news about how to curtail that, except by giving more money to the people and making sure that they're not kept at home jobless. Because the moment you sit at home jobless, you start to blame others, and that's when the trouble arises.
That's right. It's special. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else having a question? Oh, that's very good. Hardly any questions.
It's
And
very depressing, everything you've said. And then Brexit on top of it, it's a bit of a nightmare.
you're absolutely right. I think we are probably seeing the worst of it right now. So we can't really give you good news, except the good news is that the vaccine has come and Trump is gone. That's
Yeah,
the two good news on the horizon, which
but
means
Boris and Matt Hancock are still here.
yes.
What game are they playing at Brexit? Does he just honestly not know what he's doing? Because I think he's a clueless wonder.
Yeah, I think Brexit, they're saying take back control, we want our sovereignty and all that type of thing. Johnson has got to waffle his way out of that somehow to his own backbenchers. His backbenchers are wanting those sort of full sovereignty as close as possible. That he's not going to get. But he's going to say to them, I think, that, to at least make some inroads into having a good trade deal with EU, they need to compromise. And unless they compromise, their well-being is not going to be there. So he'll have to see how good a talker he's going to be. He's not going to be able to really deliver anything. It's just his waffle that gets him away, gets him out of trouble.
I think that puts him in trouble.
As well, yes. That's right. Yeah, Nimi.
Can I ask, is the government doing anything about retraining or providing easy and cheap training for people? Because a lot of what we're going through was on the cards anyway. I mean, Shafiq, I've been coming to your classes since before COVID. Last year, we were talking about the fact that shops are disappearing from the high street. We were talking a year ago about job losses. In so many people are buying online, retail is disappearing in loads of different areas. Tech is taking over, and there's going to be massive job losses. So there's a lot of fields where they are wanting workers. There are big openings in tech, in the medical fields, nursing. We need nurses. So many other jobs in the medical field, and scientists and things like that. What is the government doing to attract people to where the jobs are needed? Because it's often quite expensive to train in these areas, and they also limit the places. So I'm wondering what is being done to attract people to them.
Well, one of the continuing sort of message that they have said is that they're not going to stop immigration. They're going to have a controlled immigration, which was also the case before anyway, but they are making it into a point system like the Australians have, so that, all the doctors and all the other people can come from wherever they come from into the country. So that's one way they're saying that they're going to deal with it, is to getting only those people that are desperately required for the economy. On the training side, I think, as far as I know, in Germany, you see, what they have is a very good apprenticeship scheme where they train the people to not just go to universities, but to do this. At one time, UK had this polytechnics, which were technical colleges of a sort. So you could say that the apprenticeship scheme is something that the government is starting to sort of realize is very important, and they're bringing that in. I know my daughter lately registered with the Open University for doing a degree in history, and she applied for a loan for the fees, and she got it, which is very good. So there are those schemes which allows the people to get back into some area of their liking for future jobs. But as a whole, the world is changing, as you rightly say, from the jobs are becoming much more difficult to have because they have been eliminated through technology. Automation has come in a big way and taken away the jobs. And unfortunately, it is the corporate world that has really slept or were sleeping on the job, because what they did was to sort of sack the employees and go for either offshore products or offshore sort of work rather than retraining the people locally. So that social awareness and responsibility was missing from the corporate world or from the business world. That's why if you listen to this Mark Carney, the REIT lectures, he gives it on Wednesdays. The last two have taken place. Another one is coming next Wednesday. He talks about how the responsible government, the companies, the business world, the corporate world has got to be in order to not just look at profits and sharing of their profits with shareholders, but to be responsible for the workers in the sense of being, otherwise they'll be, the business will not be sustainable. So we have, I think, these big sort of at least ideas at work, which is happening. And this next year, there's going to be the climate thing, and he's going to be part of that. And then, of course, in USA, John Kerry has been made the czar of the climate change. So again, green energy, green economy is what these order of the day is. And even EU has, I think, approved the 750 million euro billion package for developing the green economy. So the move will mean that not only you invest in the green economies, it means also training of people. So the funds are sort of being earmarked for that anyway. Okay. Yeah. You were saying something, Nimi. I can't hear you.
I said George has got his hand up.
Oh, sorry, George. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, hello. I'm sorry I missed part of your presentation today, but I will catch it up. Like I suppose you've heard the news about we're all going Wednesday into this total lockdown again, but that's another thing. But this
Sorry, repeat that, George. What on Wednesday? What?
Wednesday, they're bringing in the lockdown again in London. Yeah.
Oh, is that so?
Yeah.
We go to tier 3, are we?
Yeah.
But we're okay for tomorrow. But anyway, a friend of mine has just had an operation in hospital, which was done by robots. A laser operation done completely by robots. And I think that, unfortunately, the world is changing drastically. And I think 20 years' time, it will be unrecognizable from what it is today. And I do begin to worry about, I don't think the government people know what's really going on. I think that there was much cogs in the wheel as or bricks in the wall as we are. I think that they think that they're doing the right thing and everything else, But I think that there's something else much more deeper going on here. I do think that this is a depopulation, and it's going to be a slow process, a gradual process, because humans are beginning to be defunct, and 50 years time it'll probably all be robots anyway. and et cetera, et cetera. But the only good thing about it is that I'm 73 years of age and I won't be around when it happens, because I don't want to be around here in about 10, 15 years time when this world is going to be a total nightmare. It's going to be completely controlled.
Well, there's one way that one could look at this, George, and that may be also a way to look at the positive side of things. This technology is delivering on a lot of fronts, which means productivity is going to be maintained without humans having jobs. So the wealth is getting created, and which means that that wealth can then be redistributed in the form of this.
It's never redistributed. It
No,
never.
but they need to bring in something called that UBI, right? If they bring in this UBI, it means that everybody will have enough kitchen money, and then they can have the freedom to sort of do what they want in terms of productivity areas or creative areas. So that's one little silver lining that I'm looking at, saying that technology will deliver. But you're right that the management of how we transition from where we are now to the the utopia that we think of is the function of this governments. And if you get this inept people like what we have right now, then I think you're right. There's going to be a problem.
But I don't think that they know. I don't think that even they know, because I think that there's something else controlling them. There's other powers in this world as well. Not just the ones that we see. There's others, and it's in their interest. They're very cold-blooded, and it's in their interest to create certain situations which will be of benefit not to us, but to other beings.
When you talk about this other forces, what sort of forces do you have in mind?
It's the forces that set this planet up in the first place, dragged beings down here to populate it, has used it as a slave planet ever since it's been here. There hasn't been one moment when there hasn't been wars, famines, people killing each other because they're black or they're white or they're one different religion. This is not a very beneficial planet, and I think that people should start thinking now about what is going on this planet and who's running this planet, because it doesn't seem to be a very happy place, or never has been a happy place.
Well, I mean, we can choose to be either dystopian or utopian. Maybe somewhere in between is the answer, George. I would recommend that you sort of go to one extreme, because we don't
George, we don't have control over what over the countries in Africa. I don't quite understand you. Of course, there's terrible civil wars and all sorts of things going on, especially in all the African countries. But what control do we have?
We've destroyed Africa. We've gone to their country in the past, colonized it, and destroyed it, made into a wasteland.
Absolutely.
But no, actually, what's happening now is actually through geography and what's happening with desertification and the climate. That's what's happening with a lot of it. So a lot of they're unable to, the farmers can't grow what they used to, and the farmers are leaving the farms and the rural areas in Africa, and they're all going into the city because they can't make a living. And then they're going to the city and they can't find jobs. They've got families, so they're deciding to go on boats and come to Europe.
Yeah, I think Africa and all the colonial past history has been a phase which has gone out, and we are seeing the impact of that now. But I feel that the independence of these countries is maybe an opportunity for them to pull themselves up, with the help, of course, of the rest of the international community. Let's hope that is a possibility.
Yeah, but we're all broke because of COVID.
How are you? I'm fine. But I'm still doing the financing in it. We're very friendly.
Yeah.
Who's saying this? Sorry, I can't hear.
Can't hear anything.
Okay. Any other questions?
I mean, it's such a depressing time in every respect that, you can't help, you start talking about it. I just, you don't know where to go with it because everything is bad. What George says about population and Africa seems to me, the countries that have got independence don't get their act together. They're run by complete crooks who steal everything they've got. Populations in the whole world keep going up, 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 and there's no one who's actually looking at that. So, just for population to increase massively, in my mind, is not a good thing. Countries which have huge populations like India, need to take control. China is the only one who made a virtue of its population, but they only did it once they regulated it, and then they managed to get their act together and are now going to be the most powerful country in the world. There are so many things going on, and unfortunately, the politicians everywhere now seem to be in it for what they get out of it for themselves. I think this thing in the past we have had to a certain extent, that people go in because they want to do good for their countries, for the world, and so on. At the moment, there's very little of it. We have that prime example here of Boris Johnson. What's he doing? He's taking up fights with our European closest neighbors. He's all, we are going to be sovereign and we'll have Australia style. What does that mean? It means we'll have nothing. It's always Australia. And you speak to the Australians and they say, we've got, that's a rubbish thing to say because we have no deal with Europe. Anyway, they're a long way away. And they just talk so much waffle, and it's a shame that people still don't see it. People are still saying, oh, yes, our sovereignty, Europe is so bad. They're trying to do us harm. And I think, oh, golly.
They voted in overwhelmingly, remember? Boris got an...
Yes, exactly. Absolutely, he did.
We're wrong, not them.
No, but they were taken advantage of, for sure. People like Boris, I think, need to be more responsible in what they're telling their people. So now, even now he's saying, oh, it's most likely things is no Brexit and we'll be fine. Well, what's he basing that on? The figures you've just shown us are not showing us that. They're saying we're going to be in a huge mess. So I find it all extremely frustrating because I don't see where the good people are. I think we've had lots of good people in Parliament.
I think, Nimi, the way that I look at things is that if we keep the focus on, some of the leaders, those bad sort of eggs, there are some good eggs as well. If you look at Angela Merkel, she stands out. The one in New Zealand stands out. The one in Pakistan stands out. Then you've got the black sheep like India, the Modis and the Trumps of the world, and the Polish and the Hungarian people. And of course, in between, you've got the others, some better, some worse. So I don't think we're going to find the one answer in one country. But what I think I look up to, or look forward to, is that people become much more aware of what is what. And not necessarily be under the influence of either these big media moguls or these social people who interfere in our opinion making and, the Cambridge Analytica type of companies. I think there has got to be regulation that needs to be brought in. And the one hope that I have is that Europe has become really the guardian of international morality in a way. Because there are some 24 countries, 28 countries now, 27, and they have good leadership, essentially, which has been hammered out for the past 60 years, I think, in human rights, in free movements, the 4 freedoms that they have. So that's all good stuff, cooperation. It may not necessarily suit some renegades and renegades like Johnson, but it does suit, I think, majority of the people. And we have been misled in Brexit over here. and that may also be mischief making through the social networks and all that, with people like Cummings, finding the right sound bites to sort of say take back control and all that type of nonsense. There are gullible people. We need to make such people more aware of what their actions mean if they sort of believe in all that. So I sort of look forward to technology delivering solutions. I look forward to good leadership, which I think could be also there. And it emerges, I think, like for instance, after all this, devilish nonsense that Trump was up to, he has been, removed. Hopefully, I think today it'll be the final nail in the coffin for him, because the Electoral College is going to vote today, I think. So again, Biden has come in, and I think he's doing what he can to try and help the situation. So there is hope like that. Yes, George, you seem to be.
You say this about people, right? Okay. Yeah. Now, at the last general election, even the Tories admit this. There was only one honest man there, and that was Jeremy Corbyn, right? That because his ideas were such that it would benefit the vast majority of humanity, like it's like he was saying, let's have a £15 or £12 minimum hourly rate for people, and Boris Johnson is people, oh no, we can't afford any of that, blah, blah, blah. Right? And he got crucified in the press. You saw what happened to him, right? He got absolutely demolished by all the media. They all came up against him. They all ganged up, everything else, right? And all the monks fell for it. So he was probably the last chance that we had in this country of a proper type of socialism where, and they just got rid of him in the same way as they got rid of John Kelly, who blew the whistle in Iraq, in the same way as they get rid of lots of people. Some people they carry to assassinate, others they just deal with, right? Yeah. People should wake up to what this world is. This is a world run by gangsters. Gangsters. Millions of people die every day. Millions of people. Children die. 300,000 children under the age of 5 die every couple of hours. No one gives a shit. People say that they do, but they don't.
Sorry, can I interrupt now? Democracy, in my view, democracy only works if people have a certain standard of education. And what we're finding is that because of the way all these countries are working, everyone is so polarized that people are taking their own sides. So people's ability for critical thinking is getting more and more limited, and people, so people who watch Fox News think that's the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And then you get the other extremes on the left. And so we've got all this nonsense going on. And what concerns me is that Boris and co are trying to bring that sort of polarization here as well by, letting Murdoch start yet another news whatever system. I think democracy, instead of going forward, is going backwards. So countries like India, I always think it's nonsense to say they have a democracy. They don't. The majority of the people have no idea what's going on. But if they're told by someone to vote for someone, they'll do it, not because they actually understand what's going on. And I think the most dangerous thing is that in the advanced democracies, things are changing now because of all polarization that's taking place. Sorry.
Somebody's phone is ringing, I think. Oh.
Sorry, that was mine. Yes.
Oh, right.
Education.
I think you're right about democracy being in trouble right now, because what is happening is that the impact on the people of this technology, social media especially, and of the change in the economy because of technology, those sort of issues are relatively new, and they need to be dealt with in some way. I think democracy is slow at work. It doesn't respond very quickly. Whereas if you take China, which is not a democracy, they react very, very quickly. And the example I always quote is the fact that, I'm from India, and I know that they were trying to build a road, and there was a tree on the way. And in the tree, they had put a couple of stones there, and somebody was worshipping those stones over there. And of course, they couldn't cut the tree down. The matter went to court, and it was languishing there for a long while. The highway was stopped. And finally, they wouldn't let the tree be cut down. They had to sort of go around the tree. Whereas I think in China, they would have said, look, we'll plant you a new tree next to the highway and put the stones for you as well.
Exactly.
So our institutions are a little bit archaic in many ways, and need to be revised when things happen which are not working well. But at the end of the day, the system is only suitable for a country, one that works. And we can't impose that system on every country, which is what we have done in the last 70 years, saying that democracy is the answer to every country. And to India, of course, it is not, definitely, because it's got 360 languages and I don't know how many religions, and that sort of thing needs to somehow have a type of government which works for India. And because things haven't worked for India, you can see how far ahead China has pulled away, because both were starting at about the same place, and China is about 5 times bigger now in terms of its economy, or even more.
Yeah.
So I think we need to not have one size fits all type of solution. It needs to be a bit customized. It needs to be worked in a manner which it needs to be introduced in a manner which works. And I don't know who can do that.
But I mean, things have to be objective. So the United States, which is the biggest democracy in the world, we've seen how that's really on the brink, because you get people who really believe that, Hillary Clinton is part of this pedophile ring, blah, blah, blah. And they really, really believe it. Whereas what we need, this is why you need central, decent, trustworthy information rather than everyone being allowed to give their own view. And then, of course, people are committed to whatever it is they believe. And if you believe in something and then you see it on Fox News, then you think, yeah, that's exactly what's going on. Whereas you watch another channel, CNN, which will say something completely different. So what do we have in the States? 50% of the population, complete split between the two halves, pretty much. And, Trump very nearly got in. It was just a matter of relatively few numbers that he didn't actually get there. But his followers are determined that everything he says is absolutely right.
Yeah. I'll come back to you, Nimi. I think George is waving his arms.
Yes.
Yeah, you talk about this business in America, right? Has anybody here heard of Bohemia Grove?
What growth?
Bohemia Grove.
No.
About what goes on there every 3 years when
No.
the world leaders go there, Bohemia Grove.
No, haven't heard of it.
Right. Well, you check it up online, Bohemia Grove, right? Every 3 years or 4 years, there is something that happens there where the world leaders go to. Ronson tried to bring it out in the open, but there's a complete embargo on it, right? Now, I'm going to tell you something, which you may find is very peculiar, right? But you can check it out for yourself. They worship the Old Testament god called Moloch. Now, Moloch is the child of human sacrifice, and it's often perceived in the shape of an owl, right? An owl. Now, if you look down on the streets of the Pentagon in Washington, the streets are laid out in the shape of an owl, right? Now, there are various things that happen at this Bohemia Grove, right? And it's all linked up to a lot of people, a lot of people. The people who run this world are not beneficial people. It's like this Epstein business, right? Clinton has been kept on denying he's ever been there. Well, there's hundreds of records that he's been there. These are very immoral, dangerous people. I could do
Yeah,
a
I
lot
think
more.
there are-
In fact,
there
I
are-
don't think you would ever believe me if I told you.
Yeah. No, you're right. There are lots of conspiracies that are there that one has a good foundation, but I'm not sure, how one can say that is the truth. But coming back to Nimi's point about the exploitation of the public by these demagogues or by the social media, or rather that aspect, I think, is the one that has caused a lot of polarization. And we have, I think, in USA, as you said, split into half. And the curious thing about USA is that a lot of Christian Midwest people are supporting Trump despite his atrocious sort of moral behavior. So there is a clear proof that they know that he's like that, but the fact that he somehow supported some aspect of their belief seems to have convinced them that he's the right guy to support. It's quite astonishing that people are so gullible, and we need to be able to have that awareness brought in. And you're rightly saying that, of course, education is very important for the Indian public. But then China seems to have somehow circumvented all that. Okay, it lost about 60 million people, I think, in the process, but it's heading towards some sort of a society which I think is working and working quite well. So we just hope that model may be adopted in some ways by honest people, at least for the betterment of their countries. Well, anyway, that's a very nice talk and discussion.
Thank you.
I have recorded all that, so I'll send you a clip of
Thank
that.
you.
And thank you for your participation and for all the questions. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and my
Thank
next
you.
lecture is not going to be, because U3A is closing at next Monday will be closed. The term closes. They have told me that I must instruct every one of you to pay their dues for membership. So do that, please, if you can. Okay, my next lecture is going to be on the U3A timetable anyway. All right. Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Are you giving us a talk next Monday?
I think if it's the 21st, is it?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it is the 21st, I think I'm going to be saying something. Yes, there are 2 lectures I'm going to be doing over the Christmas period.
Oh, so not Monday afternoon as before.
I'm not sure what time it is. I thought it was. Is it? I'm not sure. I'll have to look at that to see when they have given me the slot.
In the afternoon.
It's in
Yeah,
the afternoon.
One in the morning, one in the afternoon. I think
Oh, I
yours is
can't
in the
do morning.
afternoon.
I think I'm doing the afternoon one.
Yeah.
Mm.
Anyway,
What are you
Happy-
doing it on,
happy
Shafiq?
Christmas to everybody, or
Yeah,
whatever
happy
you-
holiday season to
Yeah.
everybody.
Happy holidays.
Take
And
care.
look forward to
Bye-bye.
seeing you
Thank
soon.
you. Have a
Take
good
care,
Christmas.
everybody.
Look after
Bye.
yourself.
Look at the positive side of life. Thank you.
Yes,
Bye-bye.
don't be too depressed. It's a new year, a new start.
Take care.
Fingers
Take
crossed.
care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.